Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Last week, we began our journey with one of the greatest alpinists of our time. At 82, Jim Donini has spent a lifetime of choosing not the tallest peaks, but the hardest lines and living by a philosophy that has carried him through storms and setbacks alive. Jim's philosophy: getting to the top is optional, getting back down is mandatory. If you haven't listened to part one, I encourage you to start there. In that episode, Jim shared his surprise cancer diagnosis, his early days in Yosemite, and the fierce motivation that kept him climbing into his 80s now. It's the foundation for what you are about to hear, because today, in part two, we turn to the human side of Jim's story. He reflects on the partnerships that defined his career and what makes someone a great partner in the mountains or in life. He speaks candidly about sacrifice, the cost of obsession, and the moments where his ability to compartmentalize both saved him and left scars. He shares what he's learned from living and climbing in these foreign lands, Pakistan, Patagonia, and beyond. Lessons about culture, resilience, and perspective that few in the West truly understand. Finally, Jim talks about slowing down, facing illness with courage, and what it means to look ahead despite all odds. His words are candid, optimistic, and deeply human. This is part two of our conversation with Jim. If part one was about the mountains themselves, this is about the man who climbed them and what his journey can teach all of us about longevity, resilience, and living agelessly.
You have to be able to embrace failure because there are so many factors that come in that will keep you from doing it fine. Largely the weather, conditions. So many times I've gone into a climb and conditions weren't right. The weather wasn't right. You can get up and they come back the next year and do it. So what was I getting? So my theory has always been getting to the top is optional. Getting back down is obligatory.
Yeah.
If you get back down, you can always go back. If you don't get back down, that's it. You're over. You're done.
Exactly. And you develop this, this uncanny sense, perhaps, Jim, of knowing when to turn back. So getting back to that, maybe you can talk about maybe one of your more difficult decisions, but
right.
maybe in hindsight, you were correct.
That's a good point because that's real critical. Young climbers say, what's the most important thing I need to do to get into serious alpine climbing? So the most important thing is your partner. Now, one thing I learned when I was in Special Forces, I was on an operational 12-man A team. I learned that you had to have faith in your partners so that they could watch your back when you were, for example, if you're on a climb, you can't have your A game every day. You want to have a partner that if you're having a bad day, they're out front. And I've learned that the sport, one of the things, you read the chapter about the climb in China when there were four of us.
Yes, yes.
The community. I decided
Yes.
at that point that I always wanted to climb with just one other person. And that person is critical. What you have to have in a person like that is, first of all, they have to buy the plane ticket. What I mean by that is that a lot of times you'll get some, oh, yeah, I'll go. And when it gets time to buy the plane ticket, they, oh, well, I can't go. So you want somebody that's going to be reliable. You want somebody who's going to have the same level of commitment you do. Maybe not more, maybe not less, right about the same level of commitment. Because when you're on an alpine climb, there are so many temptations to go back down. Because let's face it, we're doing these new big routes and big faces. There's the danger element, there's the weather, there's the work, you're cold, you're not eating well. So it's not that much fun sometimes, and it's so easy to make an excuse.
I mean, there are more reasons. There are multiple X more reasons to want to go down than to stay.
Yeah, it's very easy, I think, to have an excuse to go down. But if you don't push hard when you're alpine climbing, you'll never get up. But if you push too hard, you'll never get to climb again. So there's this fine line between pushing too hard and pushing not hard enough. And I don't know how to define that. I guess I've been lucky because I've always pushed really hard, like right cock, but I a lot of times I come down. But you got to push that umbilical cord, but you don't want to break it. So it's hard to decide. I've had a lot of luck because I've always gotten back down. Here I am. I've never even been injured by climbing.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, what I'm learning is you have had this really unique combination of this burning desire and talent and maybe luck to want to go and do some of the most, let's say, outrageous climbs, first ascents.
Yeah.
But you've also had the savvy to know when to stop.
Well, I think for alpine climbing, there's some factors. You need to have a certain skill set. You have to have the skill. You need to have good judgment. Because you can look at a face, you can say, okay, it looks like going over there is safer. There's not, you can always pick out a route that is maybe going to have less objective danger than other routes. But there's no big route on an alpine climb that's totally safe. So you have to have good judgment. You have to have good skill set. A little luck doesn't hurt.
May I ask you this question? Over the decades, since you first went to the Tetons and the Karakorums, yes, technology has come such a long ways. Better training, better gear, and also just superior weather forecasting. But we still hear of accidents in the Alpine like every year. You talked about Kyle Dempster and his partner sadly perishing, and these things happen. So in your perspective, like, what is it that climbers or alpinists of today are maybe not heeding? Are they being too aggressive? Is it something else that's still causing, that still continues to make alpine climbing so dangerous?
Well, alpine climbers keep pushing harder and harder routes. And alpine climbing is never going to be totally safe. And I think I've always exercised good judgment. But even if you exercise good judgment on a route and when to go and when not to go, there's still factors up there that are going to create dangers that you can't mitigate. You can mitigate, but you can't eliminate. So, to some extent, maybe I've had some luck too. Here's another thing. My first alpine climbs were in Patagonia, and then Alaska and Karakoram. But I've always wanted to, well, for example, in Alaska, I've done a lot of first ascents all around Denali. I've never stepped foot on Denali because to me, I want to do the technical climbs, things like the Moose's Tooth, Mount Bradley, the Stratton Aspire. You know, I had no interest kicking steps in snow to get to the highest point. So I remember when I moved to Seattle to work for Patagonia as a regional sales rep, and my wife at the time, we ended up developing a bunch of friends, and we go to parties, and I'd be introduced as the climber, right? So people go up to me and say, "Well, have you climbed? How was Mount Rainier?" I said, "Mount Rainier? I haven't climbed it." And they would go, "You haven't climbed it?" I go, "Well, you know, I've only been here for a few years. You got to work your way up to that."
Yeah.
They look at me like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with this guy?" Because they knew a guy, the next door neighbor, who was out of shape that had climbed it.
Yeah.
Never been, and I still had that. Never climbed Mount Rainier. I had no interest. I'm more, yeah. So for me, it's remote peaks that not other people aren't on, peaks that take some real work and technical ability to get to the top of. So I like around Mount Fork or Mount Hunter, all those peaks that are surrounding Denali, but not Denali. And
Sure. And yeah, I mean, you've climbed all over Pakistan and even Nepal, but I think you've not climbed K2 or Everest either.
But, you know, I was invited back in the 70s and 80s when people were just starting to do the 8,000 meter peak. I was invited on a couple of Everest expeditions, and I thought about it both times. I said, "No, I don't want to do it." I don't like taking steps in snow. It's boring.
Sure. What about attempting maybe a new route on K2 or Everest, which was away from like the traditional?
Now, when I tell people that all the 14,000 meter peaks, every one of them can be guided. And by I mean guided peak climbers that aren't really climbers, because every one of them has a route that you can have Sherpas or fixed ropes the whole way. And even K2, which is probably the most difficult, but also those big mountains have hard faces on them. Sure, they do. But I don't know. I just didn't want to. I guess I just never wanted to be around a lot of other people.
Sure.
You know, like Everest Base Camp is like a big zoo now. It's like I've always preferred to climb remote, unknown peaks. Yeah.
Jim, for sure. I mean, you are absolutely the best known for some of your remote climbing in distant parts of the world, but you started your career by spending significant amount of time honing your rock climbing skills in the more traditional climbing mecca of Yosemite back in the day. And those must have been some very interesting times.
That was a fabulous time. So when I went from the East Coast, I went to the Tetons and I started climbing there. And then I realized after a while that the bottom line, the most important skill for technical climbing anywhere, the alpine climb, is your rock climbing. Everything flows from there. If you have certain skills as a rock climber, you can pick up ice climbing right away. But so at that time, this is in 1970 when I first went there, Yosemite was the Mecca. So I got to Yosemite at a great time. It was 1970. The golden age of the 60s was over, where, you know, the golden age met guys like Chenard and Pratt and Robbins were doing their first big walls. I got there in 70 when the emphasis all of a sudden was on pushing the free climbing standards. And when I got there, I found out right away that I had a natural feeling for crack climbing. I picked it up very quickly. So, you know, Camp 4 was totally different program.
Yeah, tell us about those days. And you were maybe almost an outsider coming from the East Coast, and you were yeah, you hadn't risen up to the ranks. So
Yep.
how was that period of maybe getting acceptance and rising
Okay.
through that?
Yep.
And
Well,
even building this partnership with people like Jim Bridwell.
yeah, well, Bridwell became a good. Bridwell, they in the early 70s, Camp 4 was very cliquish. And people had a hard time breaking in and getting. I was a little bit older. Like I'd been in the Army, and I had, so it was no trouble for me. I don't know. I was accepted right away. And I made a habit of my, after that, when I saw climbers coming for the first time, I would go out and walk them into Camp 4 and tell them about the better climbs to do and even take them climbing. I always felt that was important. And Camp 4, I go back to Yosemite. I've been back there a number of times. It's just different now. Such a zoo.
Yeah.
In Camp 4 in the early 70s, there were rules and regulations, but they weren't enforced that much. So there were people sleeping in their vans in the parking lot. If you did that now, you'd be arrested so quickly. So we just had, it was like a whole lot of fun. Like, yeah, my God, is like the perfect playground.
Sure.
Life was easy. I developed certain skills in the Tetons, but there's a limit to, and then so I really got my rock climbing skills developed in Yosemite. That made me a real climber. So I was able to go to places like Patagonia, Alaska, Tajikistan, China, Karakoram. So that set me up. And I remember we were pushing the rock climbing standards then. And this is before camps. So every route I did in Yosemite, first ascent I did, was before 1976. So every climb I did was without camps. I remember one I did a climb called Overhang Overpass, which I got up over a bulge that people had tried before and they hadn't made it. So I'm up over the bulge, and there's a green camelot-sized crack, parallel-sided, and it's overhanging, it's really steep. And I realized I only have nuts. This is way before cams. And with cams, of course, you can just get rolling real fast. So I realized I'm about 15 feet above my gear, that I either have to go for it and hope it gets easier because I can't hang in long enough to get a nut working in a parallel crack, or I jump off. I was too chicken shit to jump off. So I went for it, and I went 40 feet before I could stop, and I made it. So then a week later, a really good, Dale Bart, a really good young climber, tried it, and he took a 70-foot leader fall. He didn't make it but it was overhanging. But so it didn't get a second ascent until camps came in. Camps changed it all. But people asked me, they said, well, how did you feel about doing those climbs with the kind of primitive gear you had? And I said, what do you mean primitive gear? Well, the gear that we had when we climbed was always the very best that was available.
Yeah.
Now, in the early days, nuts, Swami belts, the very best that was available will be considered primitive by today's standards. But I never felt like I was disadvantaged by the gear I had. I always felt I was privileged to have it. So you really can't miss what you don't.
That's right. That's right.
It's so funny. I was telling you about the Black Canyon being Yosemite with an attitude. There was no comfortized belays. So I'm telling a young climber that, I said, you'll never find two nice bolt belay anchors waiting for you at the end of a pitch. He said, well, how do I know when to stop? You go, oh, okay. You have no answer for that. Climbers getting
I mean, honestly, as funny as that question may sound to you, I mean, that is really what 95% of people are looking for when they get to the end point of a pitch, or even the guidebooks. The way that they describe a climb with bolted anchors is, yes, you go around, you complete this one crack, you go around the corner, you get to this ledge, you look up and you're right, and they're the anchors, and that's how you.
Yeah, right.
Jim, we talked about partnerships for a
Yeah.
second here, and for sure, partnerships in climbing are sacred. Even for like, let's say, weekend trips or day long trips, it becomes so important to go with a person that is a is not only a competent climber, is trustworthy as well, but
Right.
then also somebody you can vibe with, somebody you can laugh with,
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
you can appreciate the high moments and the down moments. And you've had some legendary partners and partnerships. So what makes in your eyes somebody a great partner? I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24 by 7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode.
I've only had great, I've been super lucky, or maybe I've been able to judge but all the alpine climbing partners that I've had have been great. Greg Crouch and Jack Tackle and Jeff Lowe, George Lowe, and John Bragg. I've always had really great partners. And, well, as I said before, they have to be people that are committed to get up a climb. They push as hard as they can, but know when to come down. But the other thing about alpine climbing is a lot of boredom, because you go to a place like Patagonia, days on end, you can't climb. It's stormy. So you want to have a partner that's fun to be around too. Because if you're in a storm bound in a tent in Patagonia for a week, you don't want to look across the tent at this person, say, I'm growing to hate that guy. You want somebody that's fun, that you can talk to, that's a real friend. And I've always been lucky about ending up with people like that. But that's critical.
What about like maybe some things that you look for? You look for like these qualities, but what about some other qualities where you decide, hey, this person was fine for this weekend, but I may not want to climb with that person again.
Yeah. Well, I worked as a guide in the Tetons for 7 years. I've taught a lot of crack climbing seminars in the Indian Creek, and I've always liked climbing with people, taking people climbing. So I've climbed in my life with hundreds of different people. But in alpine climbing, of all the 40 expeditions over all those years, I can count my total number of alpine partners in the fingers of my hand. Only about 10, all those years. So there's a difference between who you're going to climb with for a weekend or for a few days or one day, and who you're going to go to the mountains with for 2 months and suffer through deprivation, fear, cold. There's a total difference in the kind of people you need to climb with.
Jim, yeah, I mean, so many expeditions over the years, so many of them, but again, with a select group of partners, maybe can you think back to a moment where you were so grateful for your partner on some climb, and you were like, this person completely saved the day because they were there with me.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're two people on a climb, on a big alpine climb, 5,000-foot pace, you're only as good as your partner, because if your partner isn't up to what you're doing, you both have to be at a certain level, the same level, not only in commitment, but in skill set too. And also in what you decide you want to climb. Some people are more ambitious about. For me, I've always only wanted to do first ascents. I've never been interested in going in and repeating a route. I never have. And not everybody's like that. Some people are just, they'd rather repeat a route because they have information on it. Hey, it's going to be great climbing. We know. I'd rather go into the unknown and figure things out for myself. And so I need a partner that feels the same way. They want to explore, not just climb, but explore, get into unknown places on a mountain, figure out when you get to another thing, I've never, ever been nervous about a climb, going into a big climb in the mountains. One thing I learned in special forces, if you really prepare hard, you train hard, you have a good team and everything, when you get into a situation, you're not worried because you've done everything you can to get ready for it. And I've always found that you look at a mountain, you look at a route, you figure out how it's going to go. You always run into surprises. You always get to a place you go that's difficult. But then you're committed to the climb, so you just deal with it. You get up to a hard part, and you just deal. I have found that my level of commitment on a big alpine route is always higher than my level of commitment on just craggy. Because I'm up there and I want to keep going. I don't want to have to go back down. So I tend to be a little more bold in those situations, which is probably not a good idea, because if you get hurt in the mountains, you break you're on a remote peak, that might be the end of you.
For sure. Now, it's almost like it's forced boldness. I mean, obviously you have all the preparation and the experience, but when you are up in those critical situations, you don't have a choice,
Right.
because of...
When in doubt, run it out. I've had Greg Crouch was a really good partner for me. I reinvented myself in my 50s. I'm in Seattle, and I'm married, and I have a couple of children. I'm working for Patagonia, and things started falling apart for me in the late 80s. My marriage is falling apart. My beautiful daughter, who had been a straight A student, is all of a sudden running out in the streets at night, doing drugs. And so I'm going through a difficult divorce, and I have a really complex job with Patagonia. So it was all coming together, and I didn't know how to handle it all. The only thing I could do, I couldn't deal, there's only so much I could do in terms of my daughter or my divorce. So the only thing I really could do was resign from Patagonia. And I did. And they were very generous with me. I'd worked for them for 10 years, so they gave me a year's pay severance package. And so I took that time to reinvent myself. I was in my early 50s, and I moved out of Seattle back to Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, because I'm really not a maritime climate guy. And I got into hard climbing, and I met some new partners. And I went down to Patagonia. Here I am in my mid-50s, and I'm doing harder climbing than I ever had. I met guys like Greg Crouch, who was 24 years younger than me. And he had been a graduate of West Point, and I had been in Special Forces. So we had a little camaraderie based on that. We became great climbers. I had a 3-year period with Greg between Alaska and Patagonia, where for a 3-year period, we did 6 new routes and never failed. It was just, we just got really lucky with the weather. We had a perfect partnership. And, but Greg was really funny. He used military jargon. So we had what we call Medal of Honor pitches. You know, a lot of times when you're climbing in those alpine routes, you want to climb fast, you want to keep your weight down. So a lot of times we wouldn't bring a 5 Camelot along, right? So a Medal of Honor pitch is climbing a 5-inch crack with only 4-inch gear. I mean, you got to go for it. You just run it out. And he could do that, and I could do that, and that was an important thing too.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this. And maybe in Greg Crouch, you guys found this unique combination of this past or this training from the special forces, and so you understood each other in this special way that maybe other climbers did not, because they did not have the same pedigree.
Right. Yeah. Everybody brings a different background, right?
You spoke about this difficult time in your life. You were going through some personal challenges. And
Yes.
I wanted to ask about that time because you have had this singular focus in your life, almost singular focus of
Right.
maybe should I say selective focus. And in your book, you talk about being able to almost block out the hard stuff when things start falling apart in order to keep moving forward. So when you look back, do you think some of those sacrifices you made for climbing, were they
Like pretty
worth it?
I've had. Yes. And when Jeff Powder contacted me a few years ago about doing this biography, I said, well, why would I do that? But then I thought about it for a while, and I got back in touch with him. I said, Jeff, I'll do it only if we make it totally honest. I said, I sometimes have a problem with people who know a little bit about me. They'll think, okay, he lives in Ouray, Colorado. He has a house in Patagonia. He has a beautiful, wonderful wife. He travels all over the world. What am I doing right? And I wanted to say to Jeff, I said, to have that kind of adventuresome life, I had to make a lot of choices. Some of them maybe not so good. And it's not as easy as that. I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. It was tragedy that got me into climbing in the first place when I fell asleep at the wheel and my best friend was killed. I had 2 wonderful children. They're both deceased. And so it's been a difficult life. And then sometimes, the one thing when I did the book with Jeff, we spent a lot of time together. He came down and we went to Cochise Stronghold, climbed for a couple of weeks and hung out. He came home and he spent a lot of time with me and Angela, my wife. And when we started doing the book, I told him I would only do it if he was completely honest, had the gray and dark shadow days along with the good days. And so one of the things about Jeff is he's a really good interviewer, and he interviewed a lot of my friends very, very extensively. I learned a lot about myself and through those interviews. Also, he was a clinical psychologist by training. So it was very difficult for me to go through some of this stuff. But in the end, it was very cathartic. I'm glad I did. I understood it. You know, I made some decisions in my life that maybe that turned out not to be the best in terms of people around me, but I always thought I was doing the right thing. And I just wanted a book to say, okay, if you want to live the kind of life I live, you might want to consider the sacrifices you have to make.
Thanks for sharing that right now, Jim, and thanks for also bearing that in the book as well. And as I was reading, I was thinking that, you know, climbing is a unique sport. Just going rock climbing, like I'm mostly a rock climber, and that itself kind of requires some level of commitment because it is a higher maintenance sport than many others around us. And then you get into the big mountains and you get into alpinism, and that the level of commitment and sacrifice required, they just increase manifold. And it seems like the life that you have lived is maybe in those ways not dissimilar than other successful mountaineers of our times. Is it possible, Jim, to craft a life as a mountaineer without these kinds of life paradoxes? Like, I'm not even sure. Is there somebody out there who's had the kind of, or even close to the kind of career you've had, you think, without having some of this complexity?
You know, I've been lucky in my third marriage, third time's a charm, to Angela. We met, I was doing a climbing slideshow down in Texas. She came to it. She had gotten into rock climbing, and she had been working for a number of years as a cancer researcher at MD Anderson. And she's been my partner all these years since then. And, you know, she's been especially as I've gotten older and things have gotten more difficult, she's been a tremendous help to me. But I had two other marriages. One was very short. In fact, my best friend, Ross Johnson. Oh, it's a funny story. I get out of the Army and he gets out of the Army. I get into climbing and he lives in Minneapolis. And so after I went back to school, he said, come out for the summer. My dad will get you a job. His father was the physical plant director at the University of Minnesota. So I go out there and I get a construction labor's union job and make some decent money for the summer. And so I got into hanging out in Minnesota, and I met this young blonde Norwegian girl, you know, and I was at a party. I was only in my mid-20s, and I said to her, "Let's get married." And it was in the middle of the winter, and she said, "Well, we'll have to go to South Dakota to get a quick marriage." I said, "Okay," and I grabbed Ross, my best buddy from the Army, my first climbing partner. Said, "You're coming with me." So all the way out to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, whenever we'd stop and he'd go, "Jim, you're crazy. Don't do this. It's not right for you. It's not right for Sandy." But I said, "I'm doing it," and I did it. Well, then 3 years later, I realized I'd made a mistake. She was a wonderful woman, but we weren't right together. And so we go to Scotland together. So Ross, myself, and Sandy, and another friend. At the end of that time, Ross and Sandy had fallen in love. And they came up to me and they said, "Jim, well, we got to talk to you about something. You're in love, right?" And I said, "Yeah, well, go for it." Why did I bring that up anyway? I don't know. But life is complex. I guess because life is complex. And any life is more. One thing I have learned is every life is more complex than you can. You look at somebody and you immediately say, "Good climber. This guy can tell good jokes. She's really fun." You just kind of, categorize them by certain qualities. But every one of those people you're looking at, their lives are much more complex than you could ever know. And so I've been married 3 times, divorced twice, married very happily the third time. Life has been tough, and I've lost both children from various reasons. And my twin brother died from a brain tumor after we got together again. So every life has its dark moments and its bright moments. And that's what I wanted to bring out when this book was written, when I agreed to do the Survival is Not a Shore with Jeff Powder. I said, let's really be candid. And a lot of people read the book and they said, "Why did you let him say those things?" I said, "Because they're true. That's the whole idea." I was uncomfortable at first, but I said, if you're not willing to share the dark shadows of your life with the bright moments, then you're a phony. You're not telling the whole story. And it reminds me, I think sometimes, having gone through this process with Jeff Powder, is how can someone write an autobiography and make it very, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to try and be honest, but a lot of the honesty in this book is not based on what I said, but on what my partners said after being interviewed by Jeff. So I learned a lot about myself. And if I'd written an autobiography, I would have tried to be honest, but it wouldn't have been the same.
That's such a excellent nuance that you point out. I never thought of that, but yes, I don't know what kind of tricks you have to deploy when writing an autobio to be able to be that revealing. Because it's funny, I write in my journal, and even in my own journal that nobody else is permitted to read, it is so hard to be that truly candid.
Right.
And yeah, it is difficult. Jim, you have spent huge chunks of your life in some of these remote, very different corners of the world, right? Like cultures which are just a world apart. Places, so much time in Pakistan, so much time in Patagonia, where you have another home.
Yeah.
Nepal, and even Iran. And I would love to know, what have you learned about being immersed in those cultures and those peoples?
Oh, yeah.
And like, because they don't, even if they're climbing over there, that is not their singular focus. It's a different, like, are there things from those cultures that have made a lasting impact on how you see the world?
Yes. Okay. That's very true. And, my primary climbing areas have been Patagonia, Alaska, and the Karakoram. And that's because of the climbing. They're all three of those areas are granitic. So they really have a lot of technical hard climbing. But I've climbed a lot of other places like Iran and Tajikistan and China and all over. And one thing I've learned over the years is that the mountain people that I meet are wonderful. Every country I've been to, you get into the mountains, you get away, and usually the mountain people, like you go to Pakistan, they're very poor. They live up in the mountains. They don't, but they're wonderful. They're wonderful people. Every country I've been to, the Tajiks, the Iranians, when I go back in the mountains, I've really come to love mountain people all over the world. And a lot of those people are third world countries where, life is hard, life is difficult, but they smile, they laugh, people are the same everywhere. People really want to be happy. They want to be able to provide for their families. They want to be have enough. It's not that difficult to see. But what I have found is that almost every country, I've been to 60 countries and I've climbed in about 40 of them. And one thing I noticed is that the people that I meet are, generally speaking, always better than their government. Better than
Yeah.
the mountain.
I mean, what? I'm sorry, but one doesn't have to go overseas to find that out.
No. Well, yeah, things are a little difficult here right now, say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been interested in, when I go to these countries, I go to these remote areas, two things that I'm interested in are the wildlife and the people, the local people. I'm not so interested. I remember we went to Iran. It was very, very scripted. It was every day we had to be at a certain place. And they took us down to the town way down in the desert. We're 3 days of visiting mosques and cultural sites. That's not me. I didn't enjoy that much. I'd rather be up in the mountains with the primitive people in the mountains that have wonderful souls, wonderful hearts, and or that are away from the cities and the corruption of the governments. So everywhere I've been, in every country I've been, as I said before, when you get into the mountains, the people seem to be very similar.
Jim, I want to turn a conversation to the spot of the show, which I call being ageless. And yes, you spoke about how in some ways you have been blessed. Yeah, maybe genetically, luck, all these things coming into play, and you've been able to continue this lifestyle and the sport for so long. But every athlete hits the slowdown. Unfortunately, that's just part of our evolution as humans. When did that moment arise for you, Jim, when you had to reckon with slowing down?
There was a erosion of skills, and
Yeah. Was there like a definite specific time when you were like, oh goodness, I am not as sharp and I'm not at my peak?
Well, yeah, when I was 70, I did the nose in one push with George Lowe, and I only had 1.5 liters of water. And when I was 75, I was really still climbing 511 and Indian Creek in the Black Canyon. And so I'm going along swimmingly, and, because of these not having the joint issues and keeping the motivation. So I was still, and then all of a sudden, the wheels started falling off. That first time was when I started walking and feeling all out of balance, and it was affecting my climbing and everyday life. And then I found out I had Parkinson's, and I found a treatment program that really worked for me. So that was under control. And then just 6 weeks ago, break my arm doing just easy exercises, find out I had lung cancer that metastasized to the bone. So, until that happened, I was just swimming along, just enjoying life, and knowing that, eventually my skills, my body was going to start saying, well, you can't quite do that anymore. But it didn't bother me too, because I've always thought, to me, if I can go out and do a really long, moderate climb, I'll have a good time doing that. It doesn't. The number's not as important as the climb and the people I'm with. I know there's some climbers that I know that are still getting older that they still have to push themselves really hard, and if they can't climb at the same number level that they were climbing, they started to feel bad. I never felt that way, but climbing stayed easy for me for a long time, especially crack climbing, because I developed such good technique. It didn't seem hard anymore. I could do, when I was 75, I would do super crack with one piece of gear, that kind of thing.
That's ridiculous.
But anyway, but then things started kind of working the other way. You get to a certain age, like 82, I'm older than the life expectancy for men. And so, as I said, the wheels started falling off when I developed Parkinson's disease and now cancer. But, I fought for a while. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, I had a period, and my wife can tell you about it. About 3 days, I was depressed. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to deal with all this? And then I worked my way through that. And I realized that it's another challenge. I've had a lifetime full of challenges. This is just another challenge. So I'm looking forward right now to going up to Salt Lake City with Angela on Tuesday, going to the Huntsman Cancer Center, starting this new drug, see what happens. Hopefully that'll work. And hopefully my arm will heal well enough that I'll be rock climbing in a few months, maybe not at a high level. That's not important for me. It's the movement and the place where you are. You're in a beautiful mountain area and you're just on a nice long 5/8 ridge. What can be better than that?
Yeah. And for sure, no, I mean, I think it's a gift to be able to climb at all, or just to be in those environments.
Yeah.
But it's true that sometimes it becomes tough to reconcile with diminishing prowess.
Yeah.
From, let's say, on-sighting 513s,
Yeah.
or to like being able to struggling or whatnot on lower grades. Any specific tactics that have helped you maintain that joy?
Well, I think about the way people, when I got into climbing in the mid-60s, it was fortunate that I just kind of stumbled upon it. Now there's climbing gyms everywhere. And actually, that's made climbing more democratic, because when I was starting in the late 60s, most climbing at that time was at the prestigious universities, the climbing clubs like at Harvard and Dartmouth and Berkeley. And now people in inner cities can get into climbing because of climbing gyms. But for me, the first thing to try to do is the body movement of climbing. How it made me feel good, figuring out how to do this rock climb. But the main thing for me always has been the beauty of the mountains and being able to go back in areas where no one has ever been and do things no one's ever done. And that doesn't diminish. Now, as I said, in the last number of years, I've done some first ascents in Patagonia mountains that have never been climbed before, because I'm in an area in Patagonia where there's no climbers. So they hadn't been climbing before, there's no one ever tried them. But some ways, most of them were the more difficult part was finding out how to get to them. So to me, climbing's are very important from the physical side, but also from the exploratory side. There's more now. I think when people develop into climbing from gyms, they're more into the athletic movement. Getting a red point in a harder climb.
That's true. Yeah,
and that's important to me, but not the whole thing at all. So now, if I can still hike back into a mountain and do a first ascent of a peak, it's only 5/8, but I'm the first person to be up. One climb I did with in 2017 with Tad McRae. Took me 3 times a multi-day trip, first one with my wife Angela, to find out how to get to the mountain. And then I had discovered how to get there, and Tad came down from guiding on Aconcagua, and I already had the gear in. We had this wonderful time coaching the mountain, doing this 9-pitch climb, maybe 5-10, one pitch. It wasn't the difficulty to climb. It was a beautiful day. We were in a place no one's ever been before. We're on a summit no one's ever been on before. Looking out at this vast interior of Patagonia, all these glaciers and places where people have never been. And that day, a condor started circling around over us. It's a combination of being with Tad, being with nature, being in a place we never had no one had ever been before. And yeah, having some physical climbing involved too. So it's a combination, but not just one thing. I think that too many climbers today are really, it's all about the numbers.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together, training, aging, mindset, and awe. You will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
How hard?
I love that answer, Jim. And I think I'll be thinking about that for a long time on
Yeah.
maybe at that time, like this was not a specific strategy to seek out unexplored terrain or new ascents. But maybe in retrospect, yeah, that sounds like it was an important part of your, let's say, anti-aging arsenal of tricks. That you could go and get so much life out of being in those virgin places, and that I can only imagine can be so deeply nourishing.
Mm-hmm.
Just some final questions, Jim, as we round out. Climbing has been such a huge part of your life, but is there another side of you, another hobby, another thing that you do that also gives you joy on a regular basis?
Well, yeah, for a long time, it was really just climbing. But for me, climbing was always a complex because I was going to areas that there very few people had ever been. So it was exploring, climbing, it was the partnerships, the people I was with, the travel, everything coming together. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten, like in Patagonia, we have a little place down there. I've gotten into pack rafting. And that's been a lot of fun, fishing out of a pack raft and taking pack rafts down these rivers in Patagonia and going in places no one's ever been before. And so, yeah. And I've always enjoyed hiking in the mountains and doing real long hikes by myself, see how fast I could go. And I guess I've always been competitive with myself. But now, when I go to Patagonia, I spend a lot of time fishing out of my pack raft. And it's a lot of fun. It's something that an 80-year-old can do as well as a 20-year-old.
Sure. What might be a piece of advice that you ignored when you were young, but you wish you hadn't?
Well, that's a difficult question, and I got married, started a family, and I always felt that I was doing the best that I could. But then now I realize that being not a sport climber, rock climber, you're just away for the weekend maybe or for a day or two. But getting into these serious alpine climbs in remote areas, I've been gone for sometimes 2 or 3 months. And I realize now that what a burden that was for my children, my wife at the time, and my life. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Would I, if I look back at it now from the hindsight of experience and looking back at things, if I would do anything different? Well, that's the problem. If you put more energy and more time into one aspect of your life than other aspects.
Sure.
And for me, for some reason, as I said, I've always wanted to explore remote areas. So climbing, I guess, became so important to me that I was willing to maybe allow other things not to work out so well. I've always uh, I've always provided for my family, and I've always, in terms of financial, and then in terms of when I'm around and work and playing with my children and doing things with them. But I did spend lots of time away from my family. And not only that, but I got into the outdoor industry, became a sales rep. So a lot of times when I'm home, I'm actually on the road seeing customers. So yeah, I made those decisions, and I've had this adventuresome life, but I've had this tragedy too. I don't know how I would do things differently. I do know that I always feel that no one ever makes a bad decision. Now, when I say that, they never knowingly make a bad decision. When okay, so you have a decision you have to make about your life. What you do is you take all the evidence, but it's together. What's going to be, the best decision to make? But it's not. That's only part of it. The other part is where you are at that time emotionally. And so a lot of times you make these decisions that you think are best. They turn out maybe they weren't the best. But that's the beginning of the sign. I don't know. Life is. I think my lesson I've learned is that about myself and about everyone else is life is a lot more complicated than we like to think.
And it definitely doesn't get less complicated as one gets older. And
No, especially when you're trying to, get your arm healed and then get away from metastatic lung cancer. How the hell did I get lung cancer? Never smoked, but
yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Jim, I can sense one thing about you, which is, yes, you are a person of strong convictions, but you also seem open to change. Like you've embraced new climbing partners, new climbing styles. What's perhaps one thing you have changed your mind about in the last several years?
in terms of my climbing or
Just doesn't have to be.
well, of course, in the last 10 years, my uh, what I consider to do with climbing is going to be a lot more moderate than I was thinking before. I'm not going to try and do a Tori Yeager or a Laytok one, but I I still enjoy, like 3 months ago when I spent 7 days with George Lowe at the City of Rocks. We had a great time, and we weren't doing much hard climbing. We were doing a bunch of moderate multi-pitch climbs, and so I still really enjoy going on, multi-day trips like that with good people that I have simpatico with, that are friends like George, or Greg Crouch, or my wife, or people. So I'm no longer in the last 10 years, I'm not trying to, like I went to with Thomas Huber to Huber Base Camp at the Chocolate Glacier. Yes, but I had no intentions of climbing. I just wanted to hang out and give them. So, yeah, I don't know. I still like doing the same thing. I like travel. I like going to remote areas. My life would be complete right now if I saw a snow lion, for example.
That hey, yours and mine both. A snow lion would be, or a snow leopard maybe up in the upper reaches of the Himalaya. You've had the span of climbing partners, Jim. You climb with people your age, but you also climb with others who could be maybe even your grandkids, like really young climbers. So what is one thing that younger, newer climbers can teach the older generation?
I found in the last 30 years, especially, that I really enjoyed mentoring climbers. I really enjoy going out with young, enthusiastic climbers and just climbing with them and showing them some tricks. And that's really, that's important to me. And look at my partners over the last number of years. Greg Crouch, 24 years younger. Tad McRae, 42 years younger. Tom Engelbach, 18 years younger. You know, it's, well, mainly I'm getting younger climbers now because the guys my age don't want to do it, but that's more than that. I really enjoy, like, for example, when I climb with Tad McRae, I see myself in Tad 40 years ago. And so it's really, one of the good things about climbing is that most people you meet who are climbers are the kinds of people you want to be around. Like, I don't think I'd have very much fun hanging around a crowd of people that their idea of fun is going out and spending all day on an ATV on a dirt road. So climbers are climbers, you know, a certain type of person gets really into it. And I find simpatico with those people.
What makes interesting point. What makes just climbers more interesting to hang around with than some other kind of outdoor sport enthusiast?
Well, that's a difficult one. I think I guess I'd have to say it's because they're doing something I love. And like, you know, kayakers or mountain bikers or I see some of the things those guys do now, and Jesus, it looks crazy. But or base jumpers or wingsuit. I think that I would have a lot in common with them from the point of view that they're pushing their limits and they're doing stuff that's a little crazy maybe, but one thing I've done with my climbing is a lot of people get into a lot of other things as well as climbing. I haven't done that. It became sort of a key thing for me, which was both good and bad. It was probably good for what I accomplished, but probably missed out on a lot by not doing some of these other things. But I think that people get into adventure sports in general all have some common bond or some common traits that make it easier for them to be together and strike up friendships right away, because you have just certain ideas about life and certain ideas that are in common. And so it makes it easier. But,
I have to completely agree. No, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, because on this show, I think I bring together these unifying qualities, because I interview outstanding athletes from the world of adventure sports, all the ones you spoke about. And I do find that it's fascinating. Like maybe the one thing that's common in them is maybe the human powered sports, even though, yes, we do need our cars and our planes to take us to those places. But whether you're a kayaker or a mountain biker or an ultra runner or a climber, like, you kind of are doing that with your own physical abilities. And I do think that there's a lot I think that is one thing in common. The other thing I find is that they're like really high maintenance sport, and they require a kind of commitment.
Right.
That also maybe bonds them together, because you can't go on a big kayaking expedition, down the Zanskar or somewhere in Chile, without really investing your whole self into the activity. Last couple of questions, Jim. You have been climbing for over 6 decades.
Yeah.
But is there maybe one thing that you still get nervous about, which still gives you maybe the butterflies at the beginning of a climbing day?
Butterflies? You mean? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember, okay, I was climbing Yosemite, and I was never really interested in big wall climbing because I thought it was too slow. But I did a few. I did the first, I did the nose and with Peter Mace from England, and then the first big wall I did was the South Bay Wall, and that was way back when I did it with a guy, Steve Arsenal's from back east, and he had been in the Army too, been in Vietnam and had some shrapnel on his leg. But anyway, so we went up on the South Bay Wall, and I was more the free climber. He was more the aid climber. So we decided there were certain pitches I would do and certain pitches he would do. And I remember I had read about Leighton Poor, who I thought was this incredible climber. They had done the South Bay Wall, and he got up to a pitch called the Ear. It's kind of a Bombay chimney, not even very hard. And I read that Leighton Poor freaked out in the Ear, and it's about 17 pitches up. So I know the Ear is going to be my pitch, but it's free climbing pitch, and now well protected. So all the way up, I'm looking up, I can see the damn pitch, and I'm thinking, I had a little butterflies. Oh my God, Leighton Poor freaked out in the Ear. Well, blah, blah, blah. And I got there, it was anticlimactic. It was simple, but anyway, the whole time I was worried about it. And that's actually one of the reasons I really like First Descent, because you don't kind of know about a pitch that someone had a hard time with, maybe 20 pitches up. You're not thinking about it all the way. You get pitches like that when you're doing a First Descent. You run into them and you just deal with them. You're already there. But you're not anticipating all the way, over 2 days. Oh, what do I do when I get there? So,
no, I think that's such a good point, Jim, because, even on, these days, because we have so much information on our fingertips.
Yeah.
Jim, final question. If there was a billboard on the side of a highway, maybe in Uray or somewhere near you, and you could leave any message on that billboard for people, what would it say?
You mean about climbing?
About life.
Okay. It would say that in climbing and in life, the very most important thing you can do is get a good partner.
That's
certainly true in life. I've got a good partner now, Angela. And it's certainly very true in climbing, as I've mentioned many times.
Yes, yes. Indeed, Jim, that is such fitting advice. Yeah. Partnerships are everything indeed. Thank you so much. So appreciate you making the time today to come on the show. All the very best for the next few weeks. I know they're going to be critical.
Just another little problem to deal with.
Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through Brad episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.